adventure, intrigue, lost cities, ancient mysteries, and more on this week's episode of East10 Investigates. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the East10 Outpost. I'm Cody, and I'm going to be your guide into this week's cosmic journey into our ancient past. Before we get started, though, I would like to put out this disclaimer. If you're somebody of timid faith and a closed mind, I encourage you to click off now. The content I'm about to present isn't going to be very interesting. However, if you have an open mind and you're strong in your faith, I encourage you to listen on, because what I am about to summarize is highly compelling. It's been a personal journey of ups and downs and twists and turns as I've dove into this topic. It's been an incredibly illuminating subject to dive into, so I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I have. So sit back, relax, and let's take a look at the Enuma Elis and the Anunnaki. So for a little bit of context, this is the Babylonian creation myth, and it's known as the Enuma Elis. It is the oldest written creation myth that we still have copies of. Parts of it have been found at ancient cities like Ashur, Kish, Solon-Tepe, and other ancient sites. And even though it dates back to at least the 13th century BCE, or roughly about 4,000 years ago, the likelihood that it was copied from older Sumerian versions is pretty high. As you'll see in the ancient world, they were pretty fond of recycling and reusing the stories, or elaborating on them later in time, giving more context, or changing small specifics here and there. The best way to start is just to dive right in. So I have saved you the painstaking hours of combing through the text verbatim and listening to it on repeat, day, night, while I drive, while I eat, etc., so that you don't have to. What follows will be my very best summary of the Enuma Elis, free of opinion or interjection or any speculation. I hope you enjoy. In the beginning, there was nothing. The Apsu and Tiamat mixed together to give birth to the first generation of gods. From the great mixing of the Apsu and Tiamat, the first generation of divine brothers were born. You had Lamu and Lahamu, Ansar and Kisnar, and Nidamud. After the creation of the divine brothers, things continue on fairly calm for quite a while, but the divine brothers are fairly noisy and keep the Apsu and Tiamat from being able to rest. So it's at this point that the vizier to Apsu, Memu as he's called, devises a plan to kill the first generation of gods, the divine brothers. The divine brothers and their children find out of the plot against them by Memu, and they decide to take action. Now, the next part of the story begins to describe characters without any prior context. I have a hunch that because these tablets have been found in literal pieces and repieced, that context was given to the background of some of these characters that are introduced in the following tablets. So, for clarity and the ability to follow along, I'm just going to introduce these characters now because you will be hearing their names over and over as the story repeats if you look into it. There is King Anu, his spouse Antu, Enlil, his spouse Ninlil, also known as Sud. There's his brother Enki, also known as Ea, his spouse Ninki, known as Demkina. There's Nana, also known as Nannar, Sin, and El, and his spouse Ningal. Then you have Utu, who's also known as Shamash / Allah. Then you have Ina, which is also known as Ishtar. There's Adad, known as Ishkur, and then there's Nin-Hersurag, also known as Ninma and Ninti.
Then there's a group of lesser gods, semi-divine deities known as Agigi. Now, with that character introduction out of the way, let's get back to the story. Having found out of the plot against them by Vizier Mumu, the divine brothers and their children construct their own plan to strike first before Apsu and Mumu have their chance. Enki/Ea comes up with a plot to get the Apsu drunk, and in Apsu's sleep, Enki murders him, and he binds Mumu permanently and uncomfortably. High on their victory over Apsu and Vizier Mumu, the divine brothers and their children begin to mock Tiamat for either not having stood by Apsu's side or not having disavowed him and stopped him, showing her love for her children. So, in their contempt, they begin to form a plot to destroy Tiamat as well. But, as the old saying goes, hell hath no fury like a woman's scorn. And in this case, it is quite literal, because Tiamat constructs an army of demons to defend herself against her sons. Now, the next part of the story goes into fairly great detail about these demons created by Tiamat and a new character to the story, Mother Habur. These demons are described as follows: serpents with poison, monsters of dread, the Hydra, the dragon, the hairy hero, the great demon, the savage dog, the scorpion man, the fish man, and the bull man, all carriers of fearsome weapons. And with these great armies now assembled, they plotted war against one another. After many attempts and many failures by the armies of the divine, finally a hero amongst the gods steps forward, Marduk, described as being superior to all of his forefathers and his brothers, and he proclaims that he will take on Tiamat, and that's exactly what he does. He steps forward into battle, taking her head-on and her army of demons, and, well, Marduk wins. After an incredibly brutal battle, he emerges victorious, and he binds all of her demons permanently into the heavens. He puts a net around all of them to keep them there. Then he takes Tiamat, her body, and literally creates the physical realm of Earth. He assigns the Anunnaki over her, 300 in heaven and 300 in the underworld. Then an additional 900 Agigi are sent to Earth, which has now been created literally out of Tiamat's corpse. It is up to these 600 Anunnaki and the 900 Agigi to make the first city on Earth. This first city is described as Babylon, and it's here that the gods will take up post and, for the first time ever, relax in their new home. After setting up their home down on Earth in Babylon, Marduk begins to seemingly get a little bored, and he orders the Agigi to bring forth whoever had devised deception along with Tiamat against the divine brothers and their children. So the Agigi put forth Quingu, presumably one of Tiamat's demons, to answer for his crimes. And Ea/Enki steps forward to kill Quingu, and it is out of Quingu's blood that the very first humans are fashioned. These humans are referred to directly as the Blackheads. The final part of the story documents at great length how the gods civilize man. They teach mankind to build roads, buildings, shrines, temples, infrastructure. They teach laws and rules of agriculture to man. They teach man about the cosmos and their place in it. And in doing so and through these teachings, they have delivered their burdens to mankind. And it's up to humans to do with it what they will from there. So, what is the Enuma Elish trying to convey? What is it saying in actuality? Is it conveying something literally, or is it all being metaphorical? Well, let's enter into the realm of speculation for a little bit, and let's take a look. The Anunnaki have become an incredibly controversial subject, for good reason, because later Assyrian and Babylonian texts go on to describe the Anunnaki as being quite literal. They're found on kings' lists and in parts of regular legal documentation at the time. They're talked about in a literal sense, not in a figurative sense. So, were the Anunnaki people? Were they gods amongst men? Or were they something else? Well, as it relates to the Enuma Elis, I don't think that the Anunnaki are described as any sort of being. To me, what they are described as is planets, the celestial bodies. Now, in that story, and something I left out, is the mention of the planet Nibiru. Legend has it that it is a 12th planet in our solar system, also referred to as Planet X, something which modern science has pretty well proved to be not just there, but very much there and in a typical rotation with the rest of our planets in our solar system. So, what is Nibiru, and how does it relate to this story? Well, I believe that the Anunnaki, described as the Council of 12, are actually the 12 celestial bodies that the ancient Babylonians recognized. Whether modern science wants to fully recognize it or not, the ancient people acknowledged a 12th celestial body. And I believe the Anunnaki Council of 12, as it's referred to in the story, is actually just that, the celestial bodies, and the entire Enuma Elish is describing the celestial events that led to our cosmos, our local cosmos creation in the Milky Way. The net described to hold in all of Tiamat's demons, to me, sounds like what we view as the Milky Way cloud. Her demons sound like the signs of the zodiac. Tiamat herself, mixed with Apsu, is just raw matter and water. And once they collide with Marduk, another raw matter entity, literal planets are formed, now possessing water and matter. That is the Apsu and Tiamat. And it's described from them, all of the other are born. So if you take the raw matter and the water and all of it mingles and it creates these celestial bodies that begin their early rotation and through a series of wars and battles collide until finally they reach their resting spots as we know them today, I believe that's exactly what we're hearing in the Enuma Elis. So maybe I'm wrong, because further texts do go on to describe them, like they say, as very literal gods amongst men. But in this particular story, which is the oldest one that we have, this is how they are described. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me here today in the Outpost for part 1 of 3 into our cosmic journey to try and understand the Anunnaki, and if they were perhaps celestial bodies or literal gods amongst men. We're going to dive into that next week on East 10 Tuesday. But until then, thank you folks, have a blessed week, and we'll see you next time for another episode of East 10 Investigates.